Global tensions are peaking. The UK has officially urged Israel to show restraint, while France moves closer than ever to formally recognizing Palestine. This could reshape the entire Middle East balance. Stay tuned as we break it all down in detail. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today's update is one of the most crucial diplomatic developments we've seen in months. The UK has publicly called on Israel to show restraint amid rising tensions in the West Bank and Gaza, and at the same time, France is reportedly just days away from officially recognizing the state of Palestine. This is not just another news headline. This is a potential turning point in the decades-long conflict. If France makes this recognition official, it will become one of the most influential Western nations to do so, putting pressure on the European Union to follow suit. Meanwhile, London's message to Tel Aviv was very clear: no retaliation that could further escalate the situation. British officials stressed that any large-scale military response could ignite a wider conflict in the region. This diplomatic pressure is significant because the UK has historically been one of Israel's key allies in Europe. The fact that they are now urging restraint publicly shows just how worried the international community is about the current crisis. The situation is developing quickly, with both diplomatic and military factors at play, so stick with us as we break it all down, step by step, and explain what this means for the Middle East and beyond. Let's first look at the timeline that brought us here. Over the past few weeks, violence in the West Bank has spiked dramatically, with clashes between Israeli settlers and Palestinian residents escalating almost daily. Human rights groups have warned that the situation is becoming unsustainable, with record numbers of arrests, home demolitions, and civilian casualties. France has been monitoring the situation closely and has repeatedly condemned Israeli settlement expansion, calling it illegal under international law. Reports from Paris suggest that President Emmanuel Macron has been under pressure from his own parliament and public opinion to take a stronger stance. The French foreign minister hinted last week that recognition of Palestine is on the table if the violence does not stop. At the same time, the UK's decision to issue a statement urging restraint did not come out of nowhere. It followed a late-night call between Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Israeli leadership. This call reportedly focused on preventing any major military operation that could spiral into a regional war. What's interesting here is that both London and Paris seem to be coordinating their messages behind closed doors. If this coordination continues, we could see a joint European push for peace negotiations. Such a move would dramatically increase pressure on Israel, potentially isolating it diplomatically if it does not cooperate. The recognition of Palestine by France would be a major diplomatic earthquake. France is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and its recognition would carry heavy symbolic and political weight. More than 130 countries around the world already recognize Palestine as a state, but most Western powers, including the US, UK, Germany, and France, have so far refrained from doing so. If Paris takes this step, it could trigger a domino effect. Other EU nations like Spain, Ireland, and Belgium have already expressed support for recognition. This could lead to a new European consensus, which would completely change the balance of power in international negotiations. For the Palestinians, this would be a major victory in their decades-long struggle for statehood and international legitimacy. For Israel, however, it would be a serious diplomatic setback, increasing pressure to make concessions in any future peace talks. Israel has warned that unilateral recognition of Palestine undermines direct negotiations, but France appears ready to take that risk in order to send a message. The bigger question is how Israel will respond, diplomatically or militarily. If the Israeli government feels cornered, we might see a hardline reaction, including settlement expansion or new security measures in the West Bank. That's why the UK's call for restraint is so crucial right now. It's an attempt to keep the situation from exploding before diplomacy can work. To understand the significance of this moment, we need to look at the history of Palestine recognition. The Palestinian Authority has been seeking full statehood status since the Oslo Accords in the 1990s, but progress has been slow. The UN General Assembly granted Palestine non-member observer state status in 2012, but recognition from major Western powers has remained elusive. Sweden became the first EU member to officially recognize Palestine in 2014, sparking debates across Europe. France debated recognition back in 2014 as well, but ultimately chose to wait, hoping that negotiations between Israel and Palestine would resume. Those negotiations never really took off, and the situation has only deteriorated since then. By taking this step now, France is signaling that it no longer believes the current approach is working. This is a major policy shift, one that reflects growing frustration with both sides, but especially with Israeli policies seen as blocking a two-state solution. Recognition would not magically solve the conflict, but it would send a powerful message that the international community is losing patience. It could also re-energize Palestinian political factions, which have been divided for years between Fatah in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza. If done carefully, recognition might give moderate Palestinian voices more leverage to restart peace talks. On the other side, Israel is likely to see this as a hostile move. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly said that recognition of Palestine outside of negotiations encourages extremism and makes peace harder to achieve. Israel fears that recognition could lead to more international pressure, sanctions, or even legal cases at the International Criminal Court over alleged war crimes. Domestically, Netanyahu's government is under pressure from far-right coalition partners who are demanding tougher measures against Palestinians. If France recognizes Palestine, we could see a major political showdown inside Israel, with hardliners calling for an aggressive response. This might include expanding settlements even faster, cutting ties with France, or even restricting EU diplomatic activity in the West Bank. However, Israel also values its relationship with both France and the UK, so it may try to avoid a complete breakdown in relations. That is why the UK's call for restraint is so significant. It gives Israel an off-ramp, a way to avoid escalation while still voicing its opposition. The coming days will be critical, and we could see intense diplomatic activity as all sides try to manage the fallout. Let's talk about the wider international implications. If France recognizes Palestine, it could put pressure on the United States to at least reconsider its position. The Biden administration has been cautious about recognition, preferring to focus on humanitarian aid and economic support for Palestinians while encouraging dialogue. But if the EU begins to shift, Washington may find itself increasingly isolated. This could have ripple effects across the Middle East as well. Arab states that have normalized relations with Israel under the Abraham Accords, such as the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, might feel compelled to take a stronger stand in support of Palestinian statehood. Saudi Arabia, which has been negotiating a potential normalization deal with Israel, might slow down those talks or attach new conditions. This could reshape alliances in the region and create new challenges for Israeli diplomacy. Beyond the Middle East, recognition of Palestine could also become a major issue at the UN, where resolutions could gain new momentum with France's backing. All of this shows just how big a geopolitical moment this is. It's not just about France, Israel, and Palestine. It's about the entire international order. Public opinion is another critical factor here. In Europe, sympathy for Palestinians has been growing, especially after recent images of violence in the West Bank and Gaza went viral. Social media campaigns have amplified Palestinian voices and put pressure on governments to act. In France, polls show that a majority of citizens support recognition of Palestine, which has made it politically easier for Macron to take this step. In the UK, public opinion is more divided, but there is growing concern about human rights and the humanitarian situation. Activist groups have staged protests in London, calling for stronger action against Israeli settlement expansion. This public pressure is important because it affects how politicians respond. Leaders in democratic countries cannot ignore the voices of their citizens, especially when elections are near. If public opinion continues to shift, we could see more European governments following France's lead, creating a snowball effect that will be very hard for Israel to stop. Economics also play a role. France is one of Israel's major trading partners, with billions in bilateral trade every year. Recognition of Palestine could complicate that relationship, potentially leading to boycotts or sanctions. European companies may face pressure from activists to cut ties with Israeli businesses linked to settlements. This economic pressure could hurt Israel's economy, which is heavily dependent on exports and foreign investment. At the same time, recognition could open up new economic opportunities for Palestinians, including aid, development projects, and foreign investment that has been blocked for years due to the lack of international status. The Palestinian economy is in deep crisis, with unemployment rates among the highest in the world. Recognition could provide a much-needed boost, giving investors confidence that Palestine's future as a state is secure. Of course, this will only work if there is stability, which is why avoiding military escalation is so important right now. Another major aspect is security. If tensions continue to rise, we could see a new wave of violence, including rocket attacks, military raids, and possibly a wider conflict involving Hezbollah or other groups. The UK's message to Israel is aimed at preventing exactly that scenario. British intelligence agencies are likely monitoring the situation very closely, sharing information with both Israel and European partners. The last thing Europe wants is a war that could trigger a refugee crisis or fuel extremism at home. This is why diplomacy is moving so quickly. Everyone is trying to defuse the situation before it reaches a point of no return. Security experts warn that even a small spark could ignite a much bigger fire, especially given how volatile the region is right now. That is why calls for restraint are so urgent, because time is running out. So what happens next? All eyes are now on Paris, waiting for an official announcement. If France moves forward, we could see an emergency meeting of the EU foreign ministers to discuss a common position. Israel will likely lobby hard to prevent other countries from following France's lead, but momentum may already be unstoppable. The UK will continue pushing for calm, trying to keep the door open for negotiations. The next few days could decide whether this crisis leads to war or to a new diplomatic opening. This is a story that will affect not just the Middle East, but global politics for years to come. If you want to stay informed and ahead of the curve, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Share this video with your friends so more people can understand what's really happening. Your support helps us bring you clear, fact-based analysis on these critical global issues.